Hey, good to have you here, dude.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be
thought,
here.
Huh? You were thinking you did, right?
I'm excited to be here.
You got some news.
We've got a lot going on in the county commission. We just initiated a feasibility study. We can get into that later. That's boring. The exciting part is we want to bring a sports complex to Jefferson County. That would bring in a lot of tourism. We're all about tourism in Jefferson County, and we want to be the year-round playground for D.C., Baltimore families. And if we build this thing big enough, which we'll see, we got to study it, but if we build this thing big enough, I think we can bring in visitors from the region. People will fly in to the area. We've got 3 airports near us. Families who are into travel sports, that's a really hot thing. We had a meeting last week where we had representatives from Little League Baseball, travel soccer, travel baseball, soccer, local soccer wrote in a letter saying this would be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And what they told me is people actually plan their vacations around travel sports. My kids are too young for travel sports. I don't know that as well. But
hopefully you never will.
It's a lot. Well, you know what? If we build the sports complex, we can do the travel sports tournaments locally, right?
Are you modeling yours in any way after the complex Ben Salengo helped set up around Charleston?
Not that one. Well, I don't know is the answer. The one we're modeling it after is the complex in Bridgeport. They call it the Bridge. Mm-hmm. We actually had Mayor Lang, the mayor of Bridgeport, come to our meeting and explain how this thing works, how they set it up, how they financed it, and my favorite part, the fact that they generate $18 million worth of local business revenue for restaurants, local businesses, and of course hotels, which we love because that comes back to Parks and Rec. It all kind of works together. He was explaining that, and it's really an impressive thing. I've actually visited Bridgeport and got a tour from Mayor Lang. What an impressive facility. It was a Sunday afternoon. The thing was absolutely packed. Every single court was in use. There were parents who were exercising in the local gym while they're, I say the local gym, the gym is part of the facility, while their kids were playing games. There were teens and preteens who were just kind of hanging out, having a good time. Not a lot of fun things for kids to do in Jefferson County. I hear that feedback all the time. Can you build something for our kids to do? Can we get some more commercial development so our kids have stuff to do? This hits the nail on the head.
Do you have the equivalent of a 2000 rec center or a Randy Smith center like we have in Berkeley County? Do you have an equivalent to that in Jefferson County?
We don't. We're partnering with the YMCA, and we're still doing that to bring on a rec center that is more along the lines of a local facility for local kids to do X, Y, and Z.
How far along with the discussion with YMCA are you, Pasha? Because YMCA has been talking with people for the last 35 years, and it's never really gets beyond talking stage.
I think they're looking for a site. Okay. So I think it's pretty far along. And we've already passed a resolution saying we're in favor, we want to partner with you. That has 2 different sets of benefits. One is a place for local kids to play sports and do fun activities. The second thing is daycare, which is a tremendous need for our families. We have a 13-month wait for daycare, and I'm not a biologist, but I'm pretty sure pregnancies last less than 13 months. It's only 9 months. So if you're planning ahead, it's a real problem for families who are doing family planning and thinking, how are we going to get this done? For us, we just kind of figured it out as we went along. But that's a challenge. It's a real challenge.
Okay, so help me with sports complex. Is that are you thinking like a minor league stadium kind of complex?
No. This would be for youth sports, and it would be a complex that would have fields, multi-purpose fields you could play different sports on. The key is you don't want to do it with just one field or just 2 fields. It needs to be large enough. And we got into this during our meeting when we were talking to the Little Leagues. It needs to be large enough so that the leagues can host a travel tournament so that people come in from abroad. The funny thing is, if you build it small, it's actually more expensive. If you build it big enough, you can start generating revenue. So it balances out. That's what we want to do.
Give us some framework of the size we're talking about. We're talking about 5 baseball fields or Little League fields. We're talking about 15 or what?
Yeah, not an expert on it. The purpose of the feasibility study is to answer that question, but we can look at Bridgeport and we can talk to local leagues, which we did. The Jefferson County Little League said probably about 4 fields or more. When you look at Bridgeport, they're on 126 acres. I don't think they're using all of those acres. They're still in the process of building it out. They have their indoor facilities about 160,000 square feet. And this is why we had Mayor Lang come in, and of course why we're doing the study to figure this out. But the idea is you want to have multiple fields so you can bring in lots of different teams at the same time. And then you have a tournament, and then people are staying for multiple days. They're spending money. They're staying at your hotels. They're having a good time. And by the way, this is our theme, right? We're Harpers Ferry. We're Jefferson County. People come to visit. We currently get 1 million people a year for Harpers Ferry. Bridgeport brings in 1 million visitors for sports tourism. That's a lot.
Yeah. Shepherd's recently built a very nice gym on campus, and they do have a lot of baseball fields. Do you see this being competition with Shepherd and collaboration with Shepherd, or what? How it would be any affiliation at all with Shepherd?
It would not be. Well, let me not say that. That's a great idea. Yeah. That's something we should think about. That sounds like an opportunity. Now, I'm reacting in real time here, but it sounds like there's an opportunity there. We should talk to Shepherd. Part of the reason we need a feasibility study, so you don't have a bunch of county commissioners drawing on the back of a cocktail napkin how this should be.
Sure.
That sounds like an opportunity we should investigate. I can tell you, we don't want to compete with the YMCA. We don't want to compete with Shepherd in a way that detracts from their economic growth. What I'm hearing from the leagues, we had representatives of leagues that have 600 families, 500 families, 300 families. These are huge leagues. I mean, just as a quick aside, in a county commission meeting, when you have an organization that has like 30 members, you get excited. Oh, wow,
sure.
30 members, that's great. If I go to a town hall meeting and there's 25 people there, I get excited. This is great. 600 families. I mean, the scale of the support and the enthusiasm for this state.
All right, let's talk about the financing. How you're buying the land and then maintaining it, caring for it, and then once it's up and running, how do you continue to fund to pay it?
That's the tricky part, and we've got to do a feasibility study for that. I can tell you how Bridgeport did it. They did it through a sales tax. That's
you just lost half our audience.
Yeah, that is not something I want to do.
Brad Knoll, sorry, buddy, it's back.
But no, Brad's saying that's in Jefferson County. Don't bring him to Berkeley.
That's something I don't want to do. If you look at what we did for the Hilltop House, that's where we partnered with the state and we brought in tax incentives. It's a different approach. We use tax incentives. We actually cut taxes to bring in private sector investment. That's a model I prefer. I can't do the math. The reason I can't do it is because you need a feasibility study to do that. We just initiated that. But one of the things I want to look at is how do you bring in private sector development? Maybe somebody wants to donate the land. That's something we can look at too. If that sounds fanciful, I will assure you that it's actually quite reasonable and possible, because if you got a big swath of land and you donate several acres, I don't know how large you would have to be, but a sizable portion, and you have a major complex right next to the land that you retain, the value of the land you retain significantly goes up. So it's actually economic.
And it does happen. I was involved in running our youth sports league in my section of Frederick County for many years, many years. And one of the complexes we built came from donated land. I believe it was actually from the Audubon Society, if I remember, going back that many years. But it was used to create a multi-field complex where instead of using this school's field and that school's field and a mishmash and patchwork of all kind of fields that kids practice on, we were able to kind of move everybody into this giant acreage and build several fields on it. It worked out very nicely.
That was part of the testimony that we got from Little League baseball, from soccer, et cetera. This would be a tremendous benefit. The other thing to look at in terms of finances, Bridgeport does a sports complex, and that's a terrific project. They're doing very well financially. One of the things that we could do differently, and we're going to look at this with this study, is can you do a sports complex and a convention center at the same time? We're only an hour outside of D.C. If we have a facility that can host conventions during the day so that people who don't want to pay D.C. rates or who want to get out of Dodge and get some fresh air over in scenic Jefferson County, they can come on out here and use that facility all day long.
Will the Hilltop House have a convention center attached to it?
I don't know. I presume they'll have some sort of facility for hosting events, but this would be at a different scale. So this would be much larger.
Much larger.
Who's going to do your feasibility study, Pasha?
Our Jefferson County Development Authority is now authorized to go out and hire somebody to do it.
So sports are seasonal. How interchangeable are the fields? Can a baseball field become a soccer field, become a football field?
Yeah, but those are all the same seasons, basically, for youth sports. So for winter, I think the question is your indoor facility, is it adaptable to a multi-court basketball facility?
I'm not an expert, but I can tell you what I saw at Bridgeport is we had people playing basketball, kids playing basketball and kids playing volleyball right next to each other. So I think the answer is yes. That's what I've heard. We're going to examine that. Per square foot, that's probably the best way to generate revenue. We're not looking at this as only a way to generate revenue. There's a lot more to it, but I do like that part of it. I like generating revenue, and indoor facility with multi-purpose courts is the best way to do that.
Is deck hockey a part of the thought process here?
I don't know. We're going to study it.
You can
I'm
play
open to
indoor
anything.
soccer and deck roller hockey basically on those.
Yeah, I'm actually not familiar with it. You'd have to coach me up on that.
Yeah.
Now, your feasibility study, will that also include the component of raising money?
Yes,
It will.
exactly.
Good.
That's something I insisted on because I'm not in favor of raising sales tax. I understand the argument for it, but it's just not my preferred method. I'd rather look at what's called a TIF or a STIF, tax increment financing, sales tax increment financing, which is basically a way for the government to incentivize the private sector to invest through tax incentives, through tax cuts.
Now, is there a tipping point here? I'm just thinking out loud where we can bring everything goes exactly as it should. Nothing goes wrong. This is wildly successful. We're generating millions of dollars, and right. Is there a tipping point where we can get commercial air traffic to come back to the Martinsburg Airport? Does anybody know?
That's a Nick Deal question.
Yeah, this question's been raised for several years.
Right now it's no.
And there's been numerous studies. The problem is there's competition all around us, competition in Winchester, especially competition in Hagerstown. Then you have Dulles, even though when you're fighting that traffic going in, it seems like a long distance. Really, it's not a long distance.
Oh, it's every bit of an hour and a half.
I know, but when you're talking about commercial traffic, that's not very far. And so there's just so much local competition, John. And from our perspective, it'd be something attractive. But when they've done the economic analysis, it's not been there.
A couple of people online have shipped in here with some thoughts. Ken Matson said inline hockey. That's what we just discussed a moment ago. St. James Complex in Virginia is they said look at that. And Robin Berzolini, who may be Nick Berzolini's mom, said check out the Spooky Nook near Lancaster, PA.
Yeah, and how would you like to come to Jefferson to Berkeley County, Pasha? Because Brad Knowles saying he wants to do a swap. He wants to bring you to Berkeley and send our county commissioners to Jefferson.
Brad doesn't like that 1% sales tax.
He does not know.
A commissioner exchange program.
Yeah, you got to give Brad credit, though. He has a lot of humor as he makes these suggestions.
Brad's a funny dude.
Yeah.
There are things Jefferson can learn from Berkeley. There are things Berkeley can learn from Jefferson. We had a joint meeting recently in which Berkeley and Jefferson talked to our state legislators about what our priorities should be. And we were inspired in Jefferson about how organized Berkeley was and what exactly they wanted. And now we in Jefferson County have come up with a list of requests.
I'm glad that Jefferson's back involved with that. I'm going to take a little bit of credit. I started that program about 25 years or so ago.
Oh, terrific.
And Morgan and Berkeley stayed involved. Jefferson over the years came and went back and forth. But it serves, we have a lot of stuff in common. So we really need to work together. And our legislators need to hear from all three of the counties and the municipalities. At one time, the municipalities were involved too.
Our county administrator, Eddie Benitez, is starting regular meetings with the executive staff of the municipalities for that reason.
Good.
She's a rock star. We're turning things around in Jefferson County. We're coming a long way from last year when we were in a financial hole. Now we're talking about expansion and how to generate revenue.
Pasha, do you anticipate any pushback from wherever you end up selecting land for this if it takes place? Do you anticipate pushback from residents around that area? You know, Jefferson County has a reputation for pushing back on change.
Absolutely. There will always be pushback. There should be. I think the benefit of having that discourse with the public is to understand what the local impacts would be, learn from it and accommodate for that. The challenge we have as a county government is that we do not have jurisdiction over roads. So that's always going to be a problem because we can't solve every problem. We have to work with the state to get that done. And I anticipate there will be people saying, well, what about the traffic, right? 'Cause
Yes.
when you bring in a lot of visitors, there's going to be traffic impacts. That's a good problem to have rather than a bad problem, but it is a problem. So we have to address that. And it's going to be challenging since we don't control our roads.
But it was one of the issues, John, real quick, that we encountered with our complex in my son's kids' youth sports league was that the complex was going to be at the end of a residential area. And that created a lot of concern, as it should have, because you were bringing a lot of traffic through a residential area. So one of the compromises we reached was some speed bumps.
Well, residential areas, that spooks me. I'll tell you, I'm not going to dictate what needs to happen here, but through this feasibility study, I will bet a lot of money that the recommendation is it's got to be next to a highway. That's how you accommodate the traffic.
Yeah, this was a residential area not far from an exit from an interstate highway.
Oh, I see.
So,
okay.
For whatever that's worth. Go ahead, John.
I just want to say, as long as there's a way we can guarantee that the protest signs are printed locally, it's supporting local businesses.
Mike Height.
I think there's some.
That's Panhandle Printing and Design.
One of the challenges that we have is how do you sort out the difference between activists who are against everything, the so-called NIMBYs, not in my backyard, versus regular folks who are just being reasonable, and they say, look, maybe this is not a good fit, you could change it this way or that way, X, Y, and Z. And I think one of the ways that you do that is that you convene leagues that have 600 families, 500 families, 300 families that all say, well, this is a terrific thing. And if you have 20 people who think absolutely not, this is the worst thing ever, well, we have to represent 70,000. And, if we have 1,500 families represented at our commission meeting that say this is terrific, that speaks volumes.
The Middle Way Sports Complex.
Right? Don't put it in Middle Way. There's a plume there. You don't want your kids playing on a plume.
No.
Hey, Pasha, how do you, once it's up and running, how do the folks in Bridgeport continue to fund the staffing for it? Is it simply from user fees?
It's a great question. I asked that during the meeting. I said, how do we do this? Do you manage it through your Parks and Rec, or do you outsource it so the private sector that built it manages it? Those are two different models. In Bridgeport, they use their Parks and Rec staff. We could do the same thing, and their estimate, what's not an estimate, this is what they're doing. They have 20 full-time staff working on it and about 50 part-time staff. If we get a business into Jefferson County with 20 full-time staffers and 50 part-time, we cut a ribbon. This is a fantastic growth opportunity. So that's one thing to think about. Another way to do it is to have if we get private sector to do it, which I'm partial to, have them provide the staffing and the management and contract out with them. So,
but who pays them is the question. Does it come from the user fees of those who belong to the leagues? It costs $100 a year to play baseball. $20 of that is dedicated to paying the people who work at the concession stand and cut the grass.
It's going to be an amalgamation of both fees and charging people who are traveling to come and visit, and also municipal funds. That's part of the reason we have the feasibility study to answer that question. It can be financially solvent if you do it the right way, and that's the way I want to do it so that it pays for itself. But we haven't figured that out yet.
Are you looking at turfing all the fields?
I have heard a lot of different opinions on that. Part of the testimony that we got last week is that turf doesn't work as well for younger kids, and grass doesn't work as well for older athletes, young athletes, but still, let's say, high school. So that's something we'd have to balance out. Financially, I think turf is much better, but we have to accommodate for questions like that where I'm not an expert.
In terms of progress, where is this? It sounds like we're about to start a feasibility study, which also, forgive me, is like, hey, we have an idea.
That's absolutely right. It's a very nascent stages.
Okay.
But where we were when I was sworn in as president of the commission is saying, hey, this is a good idea. Let's think about it. Let's apply for a grant. Let's see how that goes. It could be 6 months or a year. And I said, no, we need to move on this right now. This is a top priority. The number one thing we heard on the campaign trail, and I talked to all 5 commissioners all the time. The number one thing we heard is we need a different type of development in Jefferson County. we're kind of tired of this whole residential and solar thing. Can we do something else and something that's fun for kids too? This hits the nail right on the head, responds directly to that feedback we got from the public.
I think you've answered my question, but for the last year and a half, 3 years, all we've heard is how disjointed the Jefferson County Commission is. I gather now that you folks are working together as a unit, at least you're talking to each other, and there's cordiality in your discussions.
Yeah, and I campaigned with these folks too. I mean, it helps that the Republican Party swept. We're all Republicans, and we all get along really well. I have a personal relationship with all 5 commissioners. We get along very well. I talk to all the commissioners as we're setting up the agenda. Every request to address something has been addressed. I'll do my best to continue with that. Of course, we are in a honeymoon period. I'll be honest. We'll see how long it lasts, but right now it's going great.
Posh, thanks for coming in, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Always good to see you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And I like your jacket.
Thanks.
Yeah, looks good, man.